Hello students, welcome. Last time we discussed procedure oriented programming and today we'll be looking at object oriented programming. So the first thing we need to understand in object oriented programming, is what are objects. So everything around us, be it people, vehicles, buildings, streets, mobiles, televisions, etc., whatever you can think of is an object. Okay, and as soon as you talk about an object will have two things associated with it. They are properties and behavior. Take any object. Okay, let's say dog. So a dog is an object. It can run, it can walk, it can eat, sleep. These are the functions of the dog object. And what are the properties of dog object? Dog object, it's the color, the name, breed, size, gender. Okay, these are what? Attributes or properties belonging to the dog object. Okay, so every object will have two things associated with it. They are attributes and behavior. And whenever any action is performed by an object, it will have some effect on itself or on some other object or on both. Okay, suppose if I use my hand to break a piece of wood, okay, so my hand object is acting on the wood object, isn't it? So if I hit the piece of wood, the wood will break. Okay, so one object interacted with another object, and what was the consequence? The consequence was that the piece of wood was broken into two pieces. Okay, so this is known as one object affecting the attribute or state of another object. Okay, now there are two types of objects. They are tangible and intangible. And there are two more subcategories. Okay, they are roles and events. So let's see what is the meaning of tangible objects. Tangible objects means those objects which can be seen and touched. Okay, so for example, cars, birds, animals, anything that can be seen or touched, it is a tangible object. On the other hand, those things which cannot be seen or can be seen but definitely cannot be touched, they are known as intangible objects. Okay, for example, your email account or your bank account, they are intangible objects. Now let's see roles and events. So roles, let's take the example of a teacher. Okay, the role of a teacher is to teach. Farmer, the role of a farmer is to do farming. So these are the roles. Okay, roles type of objects. Then events is something that is occurring in a system or organization. Okay, that is known as an event. For example, let's say you went to a shop to purchase something. There will be two events taking place. Okay, from the point of view of the shopkeeper, he is selling something. Okay, so sale will happen. And from the customer's point of view, the customer is purchasing something, so there is a purchase event. Okay, so this is known as events type of objects. Another example we can take, for example, okay, most of you must have used Microsoft Word. Okay, so when you have opened a Word document and when you are typing something, when you're pressing any key, okay, that key is recognized by the machine and it is displayed in the Microsoft Word document, isn't it? Okay, so whenever you're pressing any key, there is a key press event happening. Okay, key press event. Okay, and the computer finds out that which key was pressed. Okay, and that key is displayed on the screen. Similarly, let's say you're closing the Microsoft Word document by clicking on the top right corner, you know, that red cross icon. Okay, so when you click on that, what happens? The a message pops up that do you want to save the document? Okay, so that is a event. You clicked on the red cross and this a dialog box came up, okay, which asks you for more options like do you want to save it? If you click on no, the document will not be saved and the document will close. Okay, so when you clicked on no, that is also a click event. Okay, so that's a that's an event kind of object. Okay, so I hope these examples are clear now. Okay, now let's see how is object oriented programming different from POP. Okay, POP, whenever I use the term POP, understand it's procedure oriented programming, and whenever I say OOP, it's object oriented programming. So in the previous video I discussed POP. Okay, and in POP, if we go back, so if you look at this example, we have already seen this example. Okay, there are many functions and each of the functions had equal access to all the global data. Okay, and I told you last time that this is the biggest problem in POP. Okay, because any function can access any data. Okay, any function is capable of accessing any data. By access I mean it is capable of changing the value of the data. Okay, and this is a problem. So this problem is solved in object oriented programming. Let's see how. Okay, so here you can see that there is functions A, right? Functions A, then you have called functions B, and then you have functions C. But if you notice that these functions are enclosed in a single entity, isn't it? This function B is enclosed within this block. Functions A is enclosed with in this block which contains data A as well, and similarly functions C is in this block which contains data C. Okay, now this is completely opposite to what we saw in POP. In POP all the functions were mixed up. Okay, and any data could be accessed, any global data could be accessed by any function, but in this case that is not the way data is accessed. So if we take the example of data C is only accessible through functions C. Okay, similarly data B is accessible only through functions B, and similarly data A is accessible through functions A only. Okay, so that means what? Functions B cannot access, or rather let me put it this way, data B can be accessed only by functions B, okay, directly, but functions A and functions C cannot directly access the data B. but that does not mean that data B is not at all accessible by functions A and functions C. It might be accessible, but there is a certain procedure, and the procedure is that functions A must request functions B if it wants to access data B. Similarly, if functions C wants to access data B, it must go through the proper channel, that is functions B. Okay, so you can see that the control lies, the access control lies within the block. Okay, and if some other functions from some other block wants to access those data, it has to go through the functions. Okay, and now this block, okay, what you're seeing here, okay, all these blocks are objects. Okay, these blocks are objects. As I've already explained that an object has got two things, okay, attributes and behavior. The attributes part is represented by the data, and the behavior part is represented by the functions. Listen carefully. Every object has got two things. They are attributes and behavior. Attributes, okay, attributes is represented as data. Okay, now when we say data, this is not a single data, it is a collection of data. Okay, it could be single as well, but keep in mind that it's a collection of data. Similarly, functions, okay, functions B is not just a single function, it is a collection of functions, and again it could be a single function as well. So each block here represents a single object. Okay, and if we take for example banking application, okay, let's say this is an example for a banking software. Okay, so we might say that this piece of object is the manager object, this piece of object is the employee object, and this piece of object here is the customer object. Okay, so customer object will have its own set of data like customer name, customer address, customer age. Okay, and functions will be what for the customer, like withdraw, deposit. These are the different functions of the customer object. Similarly, employee and the manager object will have its own set of attributes and functions. Okay, now, so what is the major difference between POP and OOP? In OOP, you can see that there is grouping of data and functions. Okay, so there is a grouping of customer object, there is a grouping of employee object. So this is how the objects are, the data and functions are grouped in different entities, okay, known as objects, right? So this point is clear. Data is shared through the functions of classes. Okay, what is the meaning of classes? Classes, we'll be discussing classes in detail, so don't worry. For the time being, you can think that class and object is the same thing. Okay, so every class will have attributes and behavior, and every object will have attributes and behavior. Okay, so for the moment you can just think that class and objects, they are the same thing, but don't worry, we'll be looking at classes in detail in the coming videos. Okay, for now we'll see the next slide here. Okay, so the first point here, okay, in OOP the focus is on data. Okay, the focus is on data, and if you recall, in POP, where is the focus? The focus is on procedures or functions, but in OOP the Focus is on data. Okay, and then data and functions are enclosed in a single unit. We have already seen this, isn't it? What is that single unit known as? It is known as a class. Okay, then the next point, to solve a problem, the objects involved in the problem are identified first. Okay, so let's take the example of the banking application again. Okay, you're creating a banking software, and in that banking software, what do you think might be the objects involved? That is the first thing you'll need to identify, and I've already given you three examples. Okay, three objects, like I told you: customer, employee, manager. These are some of the objects involved in the banking application process, isn't it? Once you have identified the objects, the next thing, okay, you need to do is you need to identify the attributes of those objects, okay, as well as the behaviors. Okay, so that is the third point. Next point is attributes are represented by data or instance variables, and behaviors are represented by functions. So if this point is not clear, don't worry, we'll be seeing this in the upcoming slides. Okay, let's look at the last point. The whole program consists of different objects and communication among them. Okay, so we have seen this point, that there is communication through the functions of each object. Okay, or in other words, the functions are the medium through which the different objects can communicate. So this is the meaning of the last point. Let's see the advantages of OOP. So in OOP, the first advantage is that we can model real world objects really well. Okay, because we have already discussed this point, that in the real world, we are always dealing with objects. We are always thinking in terms of objects. Okay, so if we somehow can model this, okay, in the real life examples, if they can be somehow modeled into our software application, don't you think it will be easier for us to think and analyze the problem and create the respective code? Yes, it will be easier. Okay, and since we are thinking in terms of real world objects, the complex problem becomes easier for us to solve. Third advantage is that the code can be easily reused. Okay, now try to understand here. In POP also there is reusability. Okay, and in OOP also there is reusability, but in POP reusability is very limited. Why? Because in POP you can reuse your existing code only and only when your program size is small. Okay, but as it gets larger, it will be difficult for you to reuse your existing code. Okay, reason being, for example, let's say you've got thousands of functions in your program. Okay, now those functions are dealing with the global data. That means they are dependent upon the global data. Okay, so if you take out some functions from those and try to use it in a new project, you don't know. Okay, you don't know that which global data it is using, and even if you try to know, it will take a lot of time. So code reusability is not that easy in terms of POP, but in OOP you can see that the functions are closely tied with the data they are related to, isn't it? The functions are closely tied to the data. Okay, so customers data is only in the customer object. The functions are only dealing with the customer's data. In the employee object, the functions are dealing with only the employee data. See the major difference here? Okay, so that this is the power of OOP. Okay, the code can be easily reused because of this reason. Next point is data security. And data security, can you guess how the data is secure here? Yeah, the data is secure because I have already told you that the data, okay, the data is, the data here is only accessible by the functions present inside this block. Okay, that is why data A is secure from outside interference. Data B is also secure from outside interference. Similarly, data C has got security. Okay, so this is the meaning of data security. Let's see a few advantages of OOP. Okay, okay. The first point, that it can model the real world objects really well. You must have understood this point by now. Okay, and it's suitable for solving complex problems. Okay, again, because we are dealing with real world objects. Okay, and we are thinking in terms of real world objects. We are trying to solve the problem in our coding in terms of real world objects. That is why it is suitable for solving complex problems. Okay, let's see a few disadvantages of OOP. Okay, OOP, in OOP, the program size is relatively larger than POP. Okay, even for a small program, you have to write many lines of code. Okay, so in OOP, the program size is larger. Okay, and because of this, if the program size is large, it will require more memory, isn't it? Since program size is large, it will require more memory. So that's another disadvantage occurring due to this problem of large program size. Next, it requires a substantial amount of planning. Let's say you are working on a banking application again. Okay, so you will need you will dedicate your lot of time before you actually start coding. You'll dedicate your time for planning and analyzing what are the objects involved, what are their respective attributes and behavior, how the objects should interact, how the data should be given access. Okay, so object oriented programming requires this analysis. Okay, and this analysis could take a very long time. Okay, but once you have this analysis done, it is very easy for you to start actually coding. Okay, and the last point is difficult to understand code without class documentation. That is, let's say you have, all of you must have used system.out.println, isn't it? And maybe it is that most of you don't know what is the meaning of system. System is basically a class, it's a predefined class. And if you want to know what is system class, you have to refer to the official documentation which is provided by Oracle. Okay, so if you want to know the system class, you have to go through the documentation. So in object oriented programming, you'll be using lots of predefined classes, predefined objects. Okay, but you will not be able to figure out easily what is the code for those classes. Okay, for knowing the code you have to refer to the documentation, and that's a very long time. It's a time taking process. Okay, it's a time taking process. So that is why it is difficult to understand the code without the class documentation. The last point, consumes more memory because the large program is because the program size is large. We have already seen this. Okay, so we'll stop here. Okay, thank you.